Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I get it, old man. You built a lot of doors, okay?
Jason really going for the deep reference here to this film that I'm sure all of our listeners will understand.
I think the old man was my favorite character.
He was interesting to watch, definitely. This season of Awesome Movie Year is about the films of 1987, and we're here at our foreign film pick, which I hope some people have seen. I think people have.
I don't think a lot of people have seen it, and you're like, oh, you're really giving an obscure reference. I'm like, dude, I think we're in obscure territory going into this already.
We are, but I mean, if you're a follower of world cinema, you're certainly familiar with Abbas Kiarostami, the Iranian filmmaker, and we're talking about his film, Where is the Friend's House, which is his breakthrough film internationally. It is the first film in what is called his Koker trilogy, and it is highly acclaimed. Jason, didn't you say, I missed this looking it up, but it's somewhere on the Sight and Sound
yes,
poll?
Your beloved Sight and Sound list. He's got 3 movies on there. This one, Taste of Cherry, and of course, another one. No, Close Up. It's Close Up is the third one. So, and I watched all 3 in preparation for this podcast.
That's great. Yeah.
Josh, explain the Koker trilogy so people, maybe there are some sports fans who think it's about former Miami football coach Larry Koker. It's not, Josh. It's about.
Oh, well, that was what I was going to say it was. So,
because Josh is our sports guy.
Yeah. So Koker is the name of this village, I guess you could say, in rural Iran where this film takes place, and 2 other films as well. And it's not I haven't seen the other 2 films in this trilogy, but it's not like a formal trilogy per se, but it's all kind of dealing with reflections on the other films. The other movies in this trilogy are Life and Nothing More and Through the Olive Trees. And one thing that Kiarostami is known for, which doesn't show up in this film, is this sort of meta commentary on storytelling and filmmaking. And so those later films are all kind of like pulling back from this film. And the next movie is a character who is supposed to be the director of Where is the Friend's House, but it's not Kiarostami, and goes back to Koker to find the actors who were in that film, but who are played by different actors. And then the third film features the actual actors from this film playing themselves. And so it's a lot of playing with the idea of, what is real, what is storytelling, and that kind of stuff that Kiarostami does in other films, but doesn't really do in this one.
Yeah, and in Close Up and Taste of Cherry, you see instances of that meta technique. Josh, I don't know if I agree with your analogy that this is akin to Kevin Smith's True North trilogy.
Which he hasn't finished. So we look forward to that. I feel like you've somehow gotten Kevin Smith references into multiple episodes.
I don't understand what happened.
He's really taken up too much space in your brain. He really is.
I'm fascinated by the cottage industry. Like I go on like Facebook and like that World of Kevin Smith group, and like there are so many people who are like traveling every weekend to see like, oh, I saw the Walt Flanagan at a convention this weekend, and I got a special DVD of some horror movie that someone directed that was one of the customers in Lenin's tomb, the cat, and blah, blah. You know what I mean, Josh? They're so specific, and I love it. And it's amazing to me that he's created a whole industry on it, much like, Josh, now here's a professional segue. Kiarostami created a whole industry of making films.
Sure. I think you need to join a Kiarostami Facebook group maybe to balance out your weird Kevin Smith obsession.
I think a Kiarostami Facebook group would like start at Facebook and then lead me to other social media sites pretending to be Facebook, and then you'd be back on Facebook, but you'd be in a different group discussing that first group.
That actually would totally reflect the Kiarostami style. That would be fascinating. So, this film, as is often the case when we do these foreign films, especially from further in the past, it took a while to expand out from its original release in Iran in 1987, where Kiarostami had been making movies for many years, but had not been as well known really outside of Iran. But it did win the Bronze Leopard, which I assume is essentially like third place at the Locarno Film Festival in 1989.
Where's that?
And
Don't say
that is in
Locarno.
Italy.
Yeah.
Locarno. Yes, it exactly. It's where it is. Um, and in the early 90s, it started kind of spreading out to film festivals in North America. It played at the Toronto International Film Festival in 1992. In 1993, it played at film festivals in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., Vancouver, and Philadelphia, and then at the Chicago International Film Festival in 1994. So it took a while for it to get out there. And by the time it was released in any kind of commercial capacity in the US, it was part of this kind of wave of other Kiarostami movies that had played at festivals and people were starting to appreciate here, including the rest of the Koker trilogy and Taste of Cherry, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1997.
Yeah, and of course, this is all about geopolitics and, the Iran-Contra scandal and, of course, socioeconomic development and the CIA and coups and, things, Josh. Lots of things.
No. Some of the most of those things. But,
no? All right.
Geopolitics, maybe.
The Mons, like the Amans and Reagan. And
yeah. I mean, anything related to Iran is certainly tied up in political issues. And we can talk about that
we
later.
saw that in Argo.
Yeah. This movie is much like Argo. But I mean, the Iranian cinema in general, I think, Kiarostami is kind of at the vanguard of that being appreciated outside of Iran. But other filmmakers as well who were working at the same time and then were working later, this is one of the movies that kind of helped bring all of that to international attention.
Yeah, and Kiarostami is part of the Iranian new wave of film, which I admit, Josh, not an expert on.
Nor am I. I mean, I think I've probably seen a few more Iranian films than you have, but I would not call myself an expert, much like when we talked about the Romanian New Wave.
Yeah.
Where I was also not an expert on that, but had seen a few films.
I am an expert in New Wave music from the 80s, though.
Yeah. So let's have another Kevin Smith-esque
with Josh, of course, you could put into that group of artists Flock of Seagulls, who did the song I Ran So Far Away.
Oh, man. Okay.
Wow.
That was props to you on that. So part of the reason I'm saying all that is because looking for reviews of this, there really aren't any English language reviews from around the time it was released. And it was tough to find any reviews at all because I think beyond playing film festivals, it didn't really get an extensive theatrical release in North America. But I found a few, and the earliest ones that I was able to find online. And it's interesting to see the evolution of the critical reaction. The earliest I found is from June 1997, from Gemma Files in iWeekly in Toronto, who was actually not really into it. And this is, I think, before Kiarostami has built this international reputation exactly. So she says, Kiarostami has both a respect for the naturalism that evolves from working with a particular place and set of people, and an obvious flair for what can only be called a kind of kitchen sink lyricism. As with his earlier work, The White Balloon, Where's the Friend's House revolves around a child's self-imposed quest for something fairly mundane, an elliptical journey that involves being alternately ignored, harassed, and misled by a series of well-meaning but opinionated adults. And while I suppose the endless repetition in Kiarostami's script is supposed to seem charmingly true to life, it basically just ends up making the kid in question seem dumb as a stick.
I didn't feel he was dumb. Maybe a little misguided, right? But it's the movie was made in the 80s. There was no internet. He couldn't just look up his friend's address. He's in a rural area. What was he to do? I thought he was well intentioned, at least.
He was well intentioned. Yeah, that is true. And I mean, so if you haven't seen the film, the plot is basically this kid has accidentally taken his friend's notebook home from school, and the teacher has threatened to expel this friend if he doesn't do his homework properly in his notebook. And so our main character decides he must return the notebook before school the next day and goes on this quest basically to find his friend's house because he doesn't actually know where his friend lives.
Yeah,
And that's it.
that's it. You got
Yeah.
it, Josh.
So yeah, I mean, I think last episode you said that Kiarostami is one of my favorite filmmakers, which isn't really true.
Is your
but,
single favorite?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I have liked other Kiarostami films that I had seen before this, and his film Certified Copy, that in particular is one of my favorite movies ever. It's just absolutely amazing. And the other films of his I've seen I liked as well. I was not really into this film, and I feel like in part it's because of what she says there, is that this kid, I just wanted to smack him the whole time, honestly. He has this same sort of like stunned expression on his face for the entire film. And I don't know. I found it repetitive and kind of annoying.
And here we come back to one of the awesome movie year tropes. Josh hates children actors. And I think you're not going to be a fan of the Iranian New Wave because of, in my research, I think there's a lot of films that use children as protagonists because of all the kind of rules, regulations, censorships, and materials you're not allowed to put out while making films in this country at that time.
Right. That is true. And I don't necessarily hate all films about or starring children. I mean, we've talked about plenty of child performances in various episodes that I think are good, but yeah, I may be less inclined to love those. And you're right. Kiarostami also did a lot of documentary work, including with school children. And this film was an outgrowth of some of that other stuff that he had done before then. Of course, the cast these are all non-actors, most of whom don't have any other acting credits. And so, he's working with that naturalism. But yeah, I don't know. To me, it just felt very repetitive. It was just kind of, he looks for this, he gets misled, or he goes to the wrong place and he's kind of distressed. And just, yeah, again, the same look on his face the entire time, like, uh-oh. And that's all you
I
get.
mean, you sounds like you're describing your former pick, Smiley Face, to me right now.
I mean, I think that film was more varied in its encounters, but I mean, it is essentially one of those kinds of movies. I mean, I thought of Adventures in Babysitting that we just talked about, where its character is on a quest, on a making an effort to achieve a very simple goal and continues to hit all of these obstacles, making it impossible for them to do so.
Well, as you know, the Iranian New Wave was heavily influenced by Into the Night, the John Landis film. So there's a lot of these Into the Night films in the Iranian New Wave.
Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, it follows that same structure. So kind of on the opposite end here, Jonathan Rosenbaum in the Chicago Reader in April 1998, and this is when, like I said, Kiarostami is getting this sort of like big push. And so this is part of a bunch of Kiarostami movies being shown here for the first time in theaters in Chicago. And he says, it's entirely possible that Abbas Kiarostami, who's been making films in Iran for almost 3 decades, is our greatest living filmmaker. The problem isn't that his films are esoteric, simply that they're different from Western and other Iranian films alike in the way they're put together, without scripts and in most cases without professional actors, in the way they address us, and in what Kiarostami includes and leaves out. Where is the Friend's House is a comic epic in miniature about a schoolboy trying to return a classmate's notebook. It's about making discoveries and cherishing what's in the world, including things that we can't understand.
When he says comic, what does he mean by that, Josh?
I mean, I can only speculate, but I assume he finds some humor in the obstacles that this child faces. I can see maybe feeling that way about it.
And then this reviewer, who was this again?
It's Jonathan Rosenbaum.
Did he give any evidence why he stated that he might be the greatest living filmmaker of the time?
I mean, I think he's mentioning it right there in what I mentioned, what I quoted, that he has this unique approach and that he reaches out towards the sort of ineffable. it was a short little blurb about this, retrospective of Kiarostami films. So I could go read it more carefully again if you want to hold off for a
I
moment.
just think Rosenbaum is wrong in Baum in this one, Josh.
All right.
I don't think he backed up any of his points. I don't think there's anything funny in this movie. Maybe the old man, he was kind of funny, but like, and I like this movie better than you. I just think this review is completely off the mark. I mean, and I, we've talked about other filmmakers who have like done, taken structure like this, Mike Lee, right? And everything like that. Maybe you could go, well, he's not using professional actors and that's different than Mike Lee, but we've talked about stuff like that too. And I just don't think any of this, like, I think he makes interesting movies, but I don't think there's like, he's breaking ground here in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that Rosenbaum's assertion there that Kiarostami is the greatest, well, he's no longer living now, but the greatest living filmmaker at that time, or at least one of the greatest, he's not alone in making that assertion. I mean, during Kiarostami's life, especially later in his career, as all these movies received this acclaim and, won things like the Palme d'Or at Cannes, he was always up there near the top of these lists of the greatest international filmmakers. So I don't think Rosenbaum is out on a limb.
Well, I don't even think that that's the problem with the assertion. Like, I think you could make that assertion. I just don't think he backed it up based on your blurb in any way.
Well, maybe I inaccurately blurbed him there. I was trying to find the part that talked about this specific movie. So that was, apologies to Jonathan Rosenbaum.
Can I just say really quick, I wrote in my notes while I was watching this movie, is this supposed to be a comedy? About like 10, 15 minutes in, when the kid was like explaining to his mom about the Notebook for like the 6th time. And I was like, maybe this is supposed to be some like weird, awkward comedy. So like I did see it as meant to be funny, kind of, but I don't know. It kind of lost that as it continued.
Did you watch Close Up, Dave?
I didn't, no.
Josh and I both, Josh had seen it before. I watched Close Up. I think that kind of like real under the radar, I guess, dry wit, if that's what he's going for, is much more attuned and effective in Close Up.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I haven't seen Close Up in a long time, so I don't remember specifically. But I think Dave's not wrong that there is that kind of dry wit here a bit. It's in things like that scene where the kid just keeps trying to talk to his mom. And he's so meek and so quiet.
Yeah.
That, that was why, to me, instead of it being kind of amusing, I was like, just speak the fuck up, kid. And it frustrated me.
Yeah, but that scene's a good one to bring up because I didn't take it that way at all. I took it as he, like you said, he is meek. He's trying to get his point across. And his mom is like, no, you got to do your homework. That's what you got to do. And that was like, she was doing whatever task she had to do. She wanted him to do his tasks. And she was like, this is the routine. This is what we're doing. Stop talking to me about it. And it made me dislike the mom very much until the scenes at the end when she was much nicer. But I didn't get any humor from it.
He reminded me of Milton with the stapler in Office Space. How like it's just like
what a
so
comparison.
meek. Yeah, it's so meek that like nobody pays attention at all,
Yeah, I do think, I mean, Jason, whether you found it funny or not, I do think there is an element of intentional humor in parts of this film.
Well, Josh, as you know, I don't understand humor, so.
No, you don't. I think you need to add some jokes about Iranian schoolboys to your stand-up act, maybe, then you'll get it.
I don't know if that's getting in there at any point.
Probably not appropriate, yeah. That sounded wrong. So finally, really looking here for the earliest reviews I could find. This is from January 1999 from Dennis Schwartz, one of the earliest film reviewers on the internet from his Ozus World movie reviews. He said, "The narrowness of life and the barren landscape are excellent props for the director's vibrant themes, shot without professional actors and done in a low-key, realistic style. The dramatic aims are set too low to say this is a great film, especially when you compare it to Satyajit Ray's similarly styled Apu trilogy. But this is still great cinema, something American filmmakers would be wise to observe. Kiarostami is not afraid to let his camera follow his student around in real time, so we get an ominous feeling of what the journey was like. Kiarostami's relentless pursuit is poetically evocative, depicting life in its raw elements, nailing down the fears a child has. But if it was me, I would have avoided the trek and given my classmate his notebook in school the next day.
Yeah, you would have too, Josh. There's no way.
I totally would have. That was another thing. I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? Whatever. Screw him.
I mean, and spoiler alert, that's it. He ended up doing that. He did the kid's homework and gave him the notebook. He could have just saved himself a lot of time by doing that. So
seriously, we could have not even had this movie at all.
Josh, I have two questions. One, did you find any reviews from Iranian reviewers?
I mean, not that I could locate online. I imagine there was something at the time, but that was beyond my research capabilities. And I don't know if there would be anything that I could find that would be in English.
Okay. My other question is, do you, or Dave, you can answer this too, have a favorite movie that uses non-actors in the narrative form? All non-actors.
Probably, but I had not considered it, so I don't have one that comes to mind. I can just think of bad ones offhand.
Yeah, I think of the Soderbergh ones, which I didn't love.
Yeah, those are interesting though, like Bubble.
Yeah, Bubble's all right.
Yeah. I just for some reason kept thinking of Clint Eastwood's The 1517 to Paris, which is just one of the worst movies about those guys who were heroes on a train, and he decided to have them play themselves, and it was disastrous.
I was thinking about the Florida Project, especially a kid-driven film, but that's an example.
Sean Baker's a great example of a director who does this.
Yeah, that's a much better example. And I think actually, not necessarily, I could imagine Sean Baker having some Kiarostami influence there. And that's an actually good movie as opposed to, what I just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say even more than that, I mean, Tangerine to me would be the one.
Yeah, Tangerine is, the Florida Project has at least, it has Willem Dafoe, obviously.
Yeah.
And other people who were aiming to be actors, I guess. Of course, Brooklyn Prince at least has gone on to have a whole career. But Tangerine really feels like he, that those are those people. They're, capturing their own lives within this fictional narrative.
And recently, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, right? And, that filmmaker, she just basically cast the lead off of the internet, off of like Instagram. And that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, that happens. I think that's actually how the mother was cast in the Florida Project, also off of like Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we need to get our awesome movie year. Instagram
so awesome movie year. Get into some movies.
Yeah, cast in some Sean Baker movies. So Jason, you were not familiar with the works of Kiarostami before.
I mostly avoided him because I know he's your favorite filmmaker.
But you got a bit of a crash course here. Watched a few Kiarostami films for this podcast.
Yeah. By the way, didn't City of God also use all non-actors?
Oh yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. A movie that was discussed on Awesome Movie.
Yeah, we should have listened to that episode so we would have known. Wow. That's maybe the best of my picks.
That is a good movie.
Yeah. No, when I know when we were planning this season, you were championing us going here because we haven't covered any films from Iran or the Middle East in general, I don't think.
Right.
Ishtar aside, guys.
Sure.
This is quite the double feature with Ishtar.
So, and obviously he's a major figure and worth covering. So, I watched all three on the Sight and Sound list this week, and I got a good deep dive on it.
Yeah, Jason mocking the Sight and Sound list, yet using it to guide his film viewing.
Oh, I'm going to mock that list all the time, but I will continue watching those films.
Yeah. And Dave, you also had not seen any Kiarostami films?
No, I remembered you bringing up Certified Copy on our top 10 of the decade episode over on Piecing It Together. And so I'd always wanted to check that out. And I did watch that in preparation for this. But those were the first two of his that I had seen.
Yeah. I'd seen a few, obviously Certified Copy and Like Someone in Love, which are two late Kiarostami films that he made outside of Iran, both of which I think are very good. And I saw Close Up a long time ago. Did watch Taste of Cherry as well just before this, which I liked a lot more than Where is the Friend's House? Another, big international acclaimed film of his. So I will continue to say that while he may not be my favorite filmmaker, he's very talented. I am very interested in his work, and I'll probably watch more in the future.
I wouldn't be again watching other Kiarostami movies.
All right. Well, anything you want to say more about the background of this Kiarostami movie?
I saw Flock of Seagulls on an 80s reunion tour a few years ago. They were all right.
We'll come back in a moment and talk more of our general thoughts on Where is the Friend's House. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1987, we're talking about our foreign film pick, which is Abbas Kiarostami's Where is the Friend's House? And despite my advocacy for Kiarostami and for covering this film, Jason, you liked this more than I did.
I know. And part of me is confused. Part of me is happy that, you didn't have a good time. And the other part of me just wants a sandwich. But that's always the case. You know, what I got from really this and Taste of Cherry is the use of landscape more than even the use of actors or character. We talk about this a lot, use of environment, but and they were in a way very similar. In Taste of Cherry, you have a guy driving through a completely different landscape, a very industrial, rocky, kind of desert area. And you see like these windy paths. And here you see this little boy just kind of running through these zigzagged hills and, rocky paths, but different landscapes. But I think he does a really good job of showcasing place and how much it means to these kind of situations.
Yeah, I agree. I like that about it too. The villages themselves. I mean, when he goes to the village where the friend lives and he's trying to find the house, I mean, the whole village seems like this maze. It's got little like staircases and nooks, and it's very easy to see how he or anyone would get lost. And Kiarostami uses that really well. And there is the very striking image of that big hill that's kind of in between the two villages, with that zigzag path and a tree at the top that he has to traverse a couple times back and forth as he goes. And I read online, and this is fascinating to me, that you think that this is, somewhere that Kiarostami kind of found these two villages or whatever. But the zigzag path with the tree was something that he created specifically for this film, which I think is pretty cool.
Very Elaine May of him.
Yeah, exactly. So many connections between this film and Ishtar.
Yeah, I like that path. I think, you felt it was repetitive, which I understand. I liked those kind of little interactions he would find along the way. The old man is this guy who was a craftsman. He built doors for all of the villagers. And it's interesting because he built these like beautiful wooden doors. And now everyone wants to replace them with iron doors, right? Because they'll last a lifetime or whatever. And it's interesting, like, we hear this about craftsmen and technology all the time, right? So different time, different skill set. That he runs into his grandfather who needs to teach him discipline and respect, but really sends him down the wrong path, I feel like the way I'm going to teach him discipline and respect is by forcing him to get me my cigarettes and sending him away from doing his actual task, even though I actually have cigarettes in my pocket right now.
Right. The idea that you need to teach him to just do whatever adults say, no matter how stupid it
right.
is.
And the grandfather's like, my dad, when I was growing up, every other week he'd give me a penny, and every other week he'd give me a beating. Now, some weeks he'd forget to give me the penny, but he never forgot that beating.
And this is his example of how best to raise a child.
Exactly. Yeah. So, he just finds like little kind of, I don't even call them adventures, but little situations along the way. I think the most striking part of Joshua, you're saying going up and down the hill, is when he follows the guy, the businessman who he assumes is the student's, his friend's father, and he's riding, is it a horse or a donkey? I don't remember.
I think it's like a donkey, actually.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember. But he's riding a donkey, and you see this little boy trying to keep up and chase the donkey and follow him. And I thought that was the best. I mean, that builds to that, and it's a good usage of that.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting to me that the scene, the only time really we spend time with people and the kid isn't around, is this moment when, as you're saying, the grandfather sends him to go get the cigarettes. And instead of following the kid trying to find cigarettes, we stay first with the grandfather as he talks about his father giving him a penny and giving him a beating, and he's trying to tell his own friend about how this is the best way to raise a child. And the friend seems a little skeptical about this. And then we get the whole discussion about the doors, and the salesman who is giving a really hard sell to people about how they should have iron doors now and replace the older doors. And one guy doesn't really want them, and the salesman kind of just bullies them into buying them anyway. And I figured this must be important because this is the only time that we're paying attention primarily to these other characters and not to the kid. And then, of course, later on, we get that old man and we return to the theme about the doors, and he's the one who has made these ornate wooden doors that are being replaced. So it seems like there's something there being said about generational changes or something like that.
But you don't know what it is.
I mean, I don't know if I have a grand theory about it, but I think you can just absorb it. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay.
I was really racking my brain to see if I did, and nope, still no.
I mean, was it not sort of surprising to you that in that scene, as we've been following this kid all around as he tries to do things and he's running off, and then suddenly we're not following him anymore and we don't see what he does there?
I mean, that's a good point. At that moment, I honestly didn't even realize it because I was just watching the film, but that's probably something I should have noticed. But no, it didn't surprise me. But I mean, I wonder, Josh, because in these other films, he does these meta things, and here he doesn't. But I guess that would be breaking the form of what we had already established and then going back to the norm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not as meta as you say as things that he does in other films. I mean, this is, at least in terms of what I've seen, the most straightforward film of his that I've seen. And I don't know exactly what the background of financing this film was, but you do see at the beginning that it's presented by Iranian Child Development Fund or something like that. So you wonder if this was aimed more at actual children in the audience potentially. And so that's why it needs to be more easily digestible than these kind of self-reflexive films that he made later.
I didn't wonder that at all.
All right. Jason, not having any self-reflections related to this film whatsoever.
No, didn't make me reflect.
He liked the landscapes.
Right.
I did used to copy Josh's homework in high school, so I could relate to that part of the homework aspect of it.
Yeah, that's true. They, as you say at the end, and I did like that at the end that, this whole ordeal that this kid has gone through. And he's failed, right? By the end of the movie, he never finds the friend's house. Eventually, he just goes home and has to eat dinner and is very distressed.
Yeah, he doesn't even eat dinner.
Right. His mom is trying to get him to eat dinner and he can't even eat dinner. And he finally just sits there to do his homework. And he has that same stupid look on his face like, oh no. And then we cut to the next day and the teacher, who's really a dick, this teacher, right? And you think, here he is, he's gonna, yell at the poor friend who has always been losing his notebook and doing his homework on loose paper. And our protagonist just busts out both the notebooks, gives the one to the friend, and the teacher's like, good work.
Yeah,
and that's it.
But those kids sit next to each other and the teacher goes around the class checking the homework. So it's interesting, and by interesting, I mean strange, that these two kids with identical notebooks right next to each other, that he didn't notice that I'm guessing there was the exact same handwriting.
Right. I was wondering about that, but I feel like that's maybe a commentary on the fact that the teacher doesn't actually really care.
You're always looking for these commentaries, Josh.
I mean, I am looking for interesting things in these films for us to discuss.
And this is one of those lightning bolts for you, the Iranian educational system.
Well, I mean, Kiarostami had made documentaries about the Iranian educational system. So I think it's something that he is interested in. And I do think that that's part of the point, is that we see in the early part of the film that the teacher is really very cruel to these kids. And he never says anything really related to the quality of the homework. We don't even really learn what the homework is, right? He's just really concerned with did you do it in the proper procedural way? Did you put it in the notebook?
You know what? I could relate to that. I had an asshole teacher, Josh, when I went to Boston University. He was the dean of the College of Communications, Brent Baker. And he was a former Navy man. And this guy was such a dick, right? And he taught Com 101. And his whole thing was like, you have to be where you're supposed to be and this and that. And of course, it's my freshman year. I wanted to fly home for Thanksgiving, already dealing with depression, missing my family, missing my friends, and everything like that. And he's like, we're going to have a quiz the day before Thanksgiving. And if you miss it, you get a 0 on it. And I was acing this class easily, right? And I went in to see him and the associate dean, Dr. Root. And by the way, Dr. Root, she always said her claim to fame was she memorized everybody's name, the incoming freshman, before you came in. So she supposedly knew all 800 freshmen's name. But I knew she never knew my name. And I called her on it in front of people. And she was not happy that I poked through her little theory. So anyway, I go in to see Dean Baker and Dr. Root, and I say, look, I'm doing really well in this class. I think I've proven that. I show up, I do the work, I'm getting an A. I cannot fly home to see my family unless I go, the day before or a few days before because it's so expensive. I am willing to take this quiz like way early. Like I will take it before anybody else to prove that I can do the material and do that. And he still wouldn't let me. And he gave me a fucking 0 on that quiz. And I ended up with a C in that class. And what was the lesson? That people are fucking assholes for no fucking reason at all.
Mm-hmm.
I really think Abbas Kiarostami should have made a film about that.
You asked me for insights and relations to the film, and I could relate to this instance, Josh.
Yeah. No, I mean you're right. That is something I think that he's conveying here. That the idea that teachers, administrators, and you can extrapolate it beyond school settings,
bureaucracy,
too, of course. Yeah, bureaucracy or being sticklers for these procedural aspects that are meaningless and lose sight of what is the
really
actual important thing here. Right, which is learning. Presumably these kids are meant to learn something.
Quality time with your family on holidays.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and that's another thing, right? He's against that. The kid who's like, oh, I didn't finish the homework because I had to help my dad on his farm. And these are not well-off people by any means. These are poor rural Iranians. They probably need the kid to help on the farm so that they can keep their farm. And the teacher's like, no. Homework first, then help your dad on the farm. And, it's like, really? Come on. Do you think that's how that's going to work? This poor little 8-year-old is going to say, sorry, Dad, I can't help you on the farm because the teacher said I have to finish my homework. You think his dad's going to accept that?
Josh, here's another interesting fact about Dean Brent Baker, that beta cuck. No, but you're going to like this because, Josh, he was a PR man for the Navy, and he was the man who greenlit the videos for If I Could Turn Back Time and I Found Someone by Cher, star of Josh's pick, Moonstruck.
Wow. That what he told you in class?
That's what he said, but he's a garbage man. So I don't even know if he's still alive. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but assuming he's still alive, screw you, Baker.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad we've really dredged up this very strong feeling that you have.
I feel like I've made a clear point that I don't see how you could disagree with it. I don't think anyone's going to be like, oh, your Com 101 quiz is more important than being with your family on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. Dave, do you have any thoughts on where is the friend's house?
I think Jason's actually like spot on, honestly. Like to me, it was more about like, adults in general, but especially the teachers just kind of being dicks to kids, and that was like the main thing here. The only other thing that you guys didn't talk about that like kind of stood out to me, every line of dialogue is repeated like at least twice. Did you guys notice that?
I did.
People repeating themselves.
And, is that just because it's not professional actors and there's no script and it's like, hey, do you want to go to the park? Yeah, we should go to the park, that type of thing. Or, that's what I'm guessing because of the form. But, and I wanted to relate this back to that point that you were saying about the adults, because Josh, you were talking about that scene in the beginning where he's trying to get his mom to like listen to him. And you're blaming it on the kid for being so meek. And I'm like, man, if the mom would just let him talk, like he's a little kid. She knows he's meek. Like, so I sympathize with the kid or empathize with him while you, of course, went with the big bad mom because you got mommy issues.
No, I'm not saying that the mom is right there. She's definitely not. You're right. If she would just listen to what he actually is trying to say, then she would understand, and she's deliberately not paying attention to him. And I think Dave's right that a lot of this is about adults who are very dismissive of kids, don't view this kid as like a human being.
Right. You do what we tell you, and that's it.
Right, exactly. And then the other thing is that even the characters like the old man, who is the one character who really pays attention to him and is trying to help him, but completely screws it up. It says like, oh, hey, I know where your friend lives. Let me take you. And they walk very slowly because the old man can't walk very quickly, all the way over to this other house, which is where the kid has already been and already learned that the friend doesn't live.
Josh, you said that the only point in the movie where we leave the kid is with the grandfather, but we also leave him when the old man goes home and we see the inside of his house. And what is your deep insight on that?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's the same. You're right. I missed that one. And I think it's the same idea is that like anytime we leave the kid, because the kid is so central, it's Kiarostami wanting you to pay attention to what's going on here. And I think, it's showing the simple and kind of lonely life that this old man lives. You get the impression that probably no one really talks to this guy. And so even showing this random kid where somebody's house is probably like the highlight of his day or whatever. And he himself, I mean, he briefly kind of says that he doesn't have kids, I believe. So, we don't know why that is, but he maybe is longing for human connection.
Aren't we all?
Maybe. Yeah, of course we are. Of course we are. So should we rate this out of 5 misplaced notebooks?
Sure. I gave it 3 misplaced notebooks. It's a breezy 83 minutes. There was enough to hold my attention. As unlike you, I don't hate children. So it's, check it out. 3 misplaced notebooks.
I give it 2.5. And I mean, I appreciate and admire what Kiarostami is doing. To me, this was my least favorite of the, I think, like 5 of his films that I've now seen. And it is, maybe it's partially at least on me because I have very low tolerance for children. I just found it kind of repetitive. But I think
it is repetitive. You're right.
Yeah. It's worth seeing, though. It's certainly a very notable film in Iranian cinema and world cinema. So I'm not saying don't watch it. But for me, I would say watch other Kiarostami films first. So, Dave, how would you rate this?
I'm going 3. It was enjoyable, slow, but enjoyable.
Yeah. All right.
Certainly not worth a list of the 200 greatest films of all time, you cucks.
Jason's ongoing quest to take down Sight and Sound continues.
Yeah.
We'll come back and talk about the legacy of Where is the Friend's House. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1987, we are talking about our foreign film pick, Abbas Kiarostami's Where is the Friend's House? And the main legacy, as I've been kind of saying, is that this is a big international breakthrough for Kiarostami. And subsequent to this, his films just received more and more attention and awards and whatever, to the point where he was named by many people the best or one of the best living filmmakers in the later part of his career. He died in 2016, but was very prolific, really, up till that point.
Yeah. So why is he your favorite filmmaker?
He's not, but I do think he is brilliant, despite my lack of enthusiasm for this film. Like I said, I watched Taste of Cherry, which I had not seen before, and I like that a lot more than this. I do love Certified Copy. I've seen that a couple times. One of the few films that he made outside of Iran, starring Juliette Binoche, which has a lot of these meta elements that I think are just integrated brilliantly with its central kind of romantic story. So I'm very curious to see more of his films. And like I said, he was quite prolific. You liked Close Up, Jason?
I think
maybe more.
I think Close Up's my favorite because I thought it's based on a story, and the guy who is the lead. That's a crazy story, right? It's a guy who pretends to be a filmmaker and a well-known filmmaker, and he gets ingratiated with his family, and he says he's going to make a movie about them and everything, and it's they're planning to make the film, and he's always going to their house and everything, and then like the dad's like, I don't think this guy's really who he says he is, and then he goes to jail, and like the whole if I'm not mistaken, the whole movie is a recreation of that situation using those people, right? Which is
Right.
interesting. I like that. I was going to ask you about Taste of Cherry, spoiler, guys, which has no meta elements until the very end, where you're waiting for this climactic moment. And then he cuts away and just shows like the crew. He's like, that's a wrap, guys. And it's 3 minutes of the crew packing up, where you're like, hey, what's the resolution? What did you feel about that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the meta aspect of that film, but I mean, I did like the idea, and this is a movie that's very much built on the idea of the main character who's contemplating suicide, and he spends the entire film trying to find someone to kind of help him with his plan. And over the course of the film, you think, oh, he's going to understand the humanity of these people that he's talking to and realize that life is worth living. But there is this central question of, is he going to go through with it or not? And I do think ending the movie like that with not really knowing how that went makes sense, but doing it by having that meta aspect at the end and showing the crew, I wasn't quite sure how that
And it's interesting because, Josh, I feel like there are a lot of parallels here. This kid's running all over the place, saying the same thing over and over. Do you know where my friends live? Do you know where his house is? I have to get the notebook back. And in the other one, the taxi driver or the driver is just driving all over the place, windy roads, picking up people like, hey, I need your help for a job. Will you help me for a job? Having similar conversations. Like, I feel like the same form in a lot of ways.
It is. And I think maybe because that's an adult character with a problem that to me seemed more complex and discussions that seemed to have more depth to them, that movie engaged me more. But yes, structurally, they are very similar.
My favorite Flock of Seagulls song is Space Age Love Song.
But what is your favorite Iranian film?
Oh, I'm glad you asked because I have an answer for that. It's Children of Heaven. Have you ever seen this movie?
I have not.
It's a great movie. It's from 1997, and it is by Majid Majidi. Do you know him, Josh?
I don't.
And it's about it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. And it's basically another small movie where a brother and sister lose a pair of shoes and they have to find the pair of shoes. But it's awesome.
No, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I mean, I've seen obviously some Kiarostami films and a few others. I would pick Jafar Panahi's Offside. I really like. Panahi, of course, is in the news a lot lately because, all of these Iranian filmmakers now keep getting cracked down by the government, and any films that they make that are in any way critical of societal problems get them in trouble. And he's been technically disallowed from making films for years, but he still manages to sneak these films in or whatever. But this is before all that. So it's a more conventionally made film, but it's about a group of female soccer fans who are trying to disguise themselves as men so that they can sneak into a stadium and see a soccer match where women are not allowed. And I mean, it has that social commentary, but it's really just like a uplifting film about people who are excited to see a sporting event and their friendship and whatever. So it's a really nice movie.
That sounds good. I'd like to watch that. Josh, we focus on the art, not always the artist, but I think you got to mention there were allegations against Kiarostami posthumously by one of his actors. Did you know that, Josh?
I didn't know that, and that's sad to hear, but he's not around to respond to those anymore, so we won't really know whatever happened there.
Yeah.
But I think his body of work is, again, is something pretty impressive that is worth delving into. Again, there's these two sort of pseudo sequels to this in the Koker trilogy, which I have not seen, but would be curious to check out. And some of the actors from this film appear as themselves. The main two kids and the teacher all appear as themselves in the third film through the olive trees. But in that second film, Life and Nothing More, the meta aspect, I believe, is that they are played by other people in that film. So it's kind of
they should go all the way and have like adults play the kids and kids play the adults in that movie.
Yeah, that is something I don't think that he ever did. But otherwise, these people in the film generally, as we said, they're non-actors. They didn't really go on to have further careers other than in kind of in reference to this film. And it did get a restoration in 2019, which is, I assume, the version that we all watched on the Criterion Channel. Looked good.
All right.
So, anything else you want to say about the legacy of this film, Jason?
No, I've said it.
All right.
I've said it all, Josh.
Dave, any last thoughts you want to share?
No, not really.
Okay, good deal. Well, that is Where is the Friend's House? And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Bring us your notebooks online and on social media.
Or tell us your favorite Flock of Seagulls song. And if it's not Space Age Love Song, you're probably wrong. I'm Jason Harris Comedy on Facebook and Instagram. J Harris Comedy on X Twitter, X Twitter. We also have a website, Eat This Comedy. By the time this show comes out, we might have new shows for Eat This Comedy. How about that? Hooray.
All right.
And of course, you can find me at Go for Jason, but for some reason, you all refuse to do that on Letterboxd. Come on, y'all. I want to see what you're watching too. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year, Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on X Twitter, XX Twitter. And that's where we're at, Josh.
Yeah. You can find some old things from me, possibly something about a Kiarostami movie. I don't know.
He's your favorite.
At joshbellhateseverything.com. So enticing. Also at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Twitter X, and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd, where I have more followers than you, Jason, but not that many. So
Rub it in, Josh.
I'm saying I too want, some more followers on Letterboxd. I, post more valuable things there. I feel like than on the other garbage social media sites, probably. And of course, you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what do we have in our next episode?
Josh, I think the next one is going to be a film that more people are familiar with than perhaps this one here, Josh.
Yes.
Don't quote me on that.
I believe you're correct.
It's my pick, Josh, and it is called The Princess Bride. We finally come home to Awesome Movie Year's #1 director, Rob Reiner.
Oh, yeah. So tune in next time for The Princess Bride, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.